Welcome to our segment on limiting the risk of exposure from cross-contamination. We're essentially talking about the fact that we don't want students, our children, to be touching their faces, their mouths, their nose, their eyes, and we want to limit the risk of exposure to the virus. So that's essentially what this segment is about. I'm Julie Swanson, I'm the Life Skills Lady, and I'm joined by Megan McCarran, who is the Director of Sport Services for Milestones Behavioral Services. Thanks, Megan, for joining us. Yes,
Thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. This is such an important topic as part of our overall series on viral health and safety skills. Now, when we talk about this topic, we sort of have to break it into two sections. And Megan's going to start with one and then go on to the second. And that is, we want to reduce the chances that students are going to be touching objects, right? We know it's impossible not to touch things all day long, right? But objects where we believe there could be a heightened risk. And then, of course, then touching your face, which may be your eyes, your nose, or your mouth. So Megan's going to break it in to those two sections because they go hand in hand, don't they, Megan?
They do, exactly.
Right. When we were talking about how do we do this, should we do it in two segments? And we ultimately realized that they go hand in hand, right? So yeah. Megan, take it away and get us started.
Okay, so when we're talking about how to help our learners reduce the chances that they're going to be touching items in the environment and also then touching their face to limit the cross-contamination, one of the first things we want to do is identify something that's reinforcing for them. We want to make sure we've got reinforcers on hand because we're going to be using that principle a lot to help teach them alternate things to be doing. So in terms of setting yourself up for success when you are either at school or in the community and want to avoid touching items or objects, think about when you're going to be in those environments and how you're going to navigate there. So if you can go into the community at a time where it's going to be less crowded, it gives you more space to navigate and go where it is going to be, you have a better chance of being most successful. In a school environment, an example would be, during change of classes, the hallways are very crowded and there's lots of chance to bump into things, touch people's backpacks or things like that. If you have the ability to be able to transition either a few minutes before everybody else or a few minutes afterwards, you have more room in the hallways. And therefore, if there are items that are high interest that your student is likely to want to go touch, you can navigate farther away from them and position yourself such that you're between the student and the item of interest. This is where your reinforcers come in handy, because then you want to be reinforcing them for, hey, you're doing a great job walking down the hallway. I love what you're doing. Oh, we're going to the science room now. Great job heading that way. And giving access to reinforcers. Another item that could be, or another thing that can be helpful in a situation like that is to have the student carry something. So if they've got school materials that they need to get from one place to the other, if their hands are full, less likely that they're going to go try and touch something else because now they don't have free use of their hands to do that. So, and that's true in the community as well. So if you're in a community setting and you've got something that the student, your child can carry with them, that's a great idea to have that with them. Again, have reinforcers with you. In a store that has carts or something like that, you can have them hold on to that with you. You've got the ability to clean that first, so you know when they're touching it, it's already been sanitized, and that's a safe thing for them to be holding on to. It's also going to help keep them closer to you. So those are some behaviors or things that you can do that are going to set you up for success in terms of avoiding high interest items in the environment. Now,
so Megan, I usually at the beginning of these segments talk about the principles that we're going to be talking about, and I failed to do that. So you've talked about reinforcement. So that's one of the things, one of the principles that you should be using when teaching these skills. And the other one is going to be incompatible behaviors, which I know you're going to simplify for everyone.
Yes. So actually, I can do that right now. So
Good.
An incompatible behavior is basically something you can't do. So I'm going to give an example. I can't be playing with this hand weight and have my hands in my pocket at the same time. The two things are incompatible with each other. So if another example would be, I can't be writing something on my paper and spinning around. Well, if my paper's on the table, some of our students are pretty tricky, so that maybe isn't the best example. Now, yes, they could, but it's two things that can't happen at the same time. So, and that's what makes them incompatible. So when I talk about it here and it's looking for something, what's something that I want them to be doing or something that's okay for the student to be doing that is not, that they can't do at the same time as touching other items in the environment or touching their face. So hands in pocket is actually a very good example for this one. If you've got the hands in pocket, carrying something, holding onto the shopping cart, all of those are things that you could reinforce. So you want to give praise for and have the student doing more often. And then that way it will reduce the likelihood that they're engaging in these behaviors of touching other things.
So let me ask you a question, because I think there's two ways that you could say the reinforcement. One would be, oh my gosh, look at you, you're not touching things, right? Or, oh gosh, look at you, your hands are in your pockets, good for you. Which is the better one to do, to reinforce what they're not doing or reinforce what they are doing?
That's an excellent question. And in our environment, we tend to focus on what we don't want people to do, where, you know, our rules are set up around don't do this and don't do that, but don't tell us what we want you to do instead, which leaves this big void and a lot of guessing on the part of the learner. So the best way to phrase your reinforcement is to give behavior specific praise for what you want them to do. So excellent
Nice
job.
job
I love
keeping
you've
your
got your hands in your pocket.
Yeah.
You look so cool with your hands in your pocket. Oh, thank you so much for carrying those books for me. You're such a huge help. Something like that.
Great.
So you want to specify, and when giving rules, you want to specify what you want to have happen, as opposed to what you don't want to have happen.
And that's such a great tip. And I also just want to take this opportunity to make sure that you are working with your school team or some other resource provider, whether it's through your insurance and you have behavioral services through insurance, because some of these principles of applied behavior analysis can get very involved. We're here in these segments to just get the process started and talk about some of these principles, but we really want to make them as easy as possible for you. So when we get into talking about reinforcing incompatible behaviors and all that, we're getting kind of deep. We're taking a deeper dive into the behavioral principles, but we really want to keep this as simple as possible. However, we do encourage you to work with your school's team to help you with these principles.
Yes, definitely. Oftentimes when we talk about the principles of behavior analysis, we talk, you're talking about something and there's so much involved that we kind of make it sound like this neat little package tied up in a bow. And when you take that bow off, there's a whole lot of information in there that you've got to unpack to actually be able to make the best use of it. So it's not as sweet and simple as it may seem at first glance. Oh, just do this. Now you've got the answer.
Right.
Behavior doesn't happen in a vacuum. So there's all kinds of different things going on that make it more complicated.
Is there anything else about, reducing the likelihood of touching objects?
I think the key things for reducing objects are if you can set up your environment the best way you can to control the student's access to things that you know that they're likely to want to touch. do that to the best of your ability. If you can't do that, you're in the community, you don't have control over the items. Think about when you're going and when you have the most ability to navigate to the less crowded areas or navigate around those high interest items. Come prepared with your reinforcers, reinforce for holding on to the cart, for walking down the hallway appropriately. I think those are the key things I would focus on to get started for that. Now, when we talk about not touching your face, it gets a little bit trickier because of course our hands and our face are always with us, and
yes, they are
under the control of the individual. We don't control them, and we're not going to walk around, putting them in a bear hug or something to keep their hands down. So again, reinforcing them for having their hands by their side, swinging their hands. This would be a weird thing to carry, but carrying something. Those are all great things to reinforce that are different than touching your face. And
I just need to interject really quickly. You have a dumbbell on your desk because we were trying to figure out how to prop up your computer and get it at the right angle. Just in case anybody's wondering why you have a dumbbell on your desk.
Yes, we're doing a little bit of problem solving this morning. That was involved in it. So setting up for success in terms of keeping your hands from your face. I mean, one of the reasons we want to keep our hands from our face is because and our students, we don't want them touching items that are contaminated and then putting that contamination onto your mouth, nose, or eyes. So I know there was an earlier segment talking about hand washing. And, hand washing, you hear it in the news and on Facebook, it's all over the place. It's really a very key element to helping stop the spread, which is why you keep hearing about it. So that is setting yourself up for success for this one, is to make sure that you have
frequent hand washing.
Yeah, frequent hand washing. And then keeping hand sanitizer or sanitizing wipes with you so that if your student does go and touch something, you can quickly sanitize. So that way, if they do touch their face, at least you have minimized the amount of contamination that may be on their hands. And again, the key thing there is going to be reinforcing doing anything else with your hands, keeping your hands down, carrying something, walking nicely, and having, if there are certain situations in which it's more likely that the individual is either going to start touching their face or touch certain items, make sure you've got your reinforcer with you and you're constantly doing it. And also keep in mind, these are things you can practice at home, at school all the time. You don't have to wait until you're in the situation to work on it. The more you practice it, the more you reinforce it, the more likely it is to generalize or occur and have success in other environments. So,
and this is where I'd say reach out to your team for parent training, because this is a skill, that we have to have in all environments. It's just not in the school building. It's everywhere else. It's everywhere. And so you may be in school 100% of the time. You may have a hybrid program, or you may be just doing distance learning. Either way, you want to be working with the team and ask for parent training around this, because it's all of the viral health and safety skills are important. I don't know which one to say is more important than the other. They're all important. But I find with my own son, I have a young adult son who has an autism spectrum disorder. And, I find myself saying, don't touch your face, and of course that's reinforcing him for doing the exact thing that I don't want him to do. I catch myself doing that, and so it's being cognizant. And as you said, setting yourself up for success before you venture out somewhere that you've said, oh, okay, we're not going to touch our face. Here's your lizard or whatever it is. For my son, it's those squiggly lizards. He's been reinforced by that since he was a little guy, and it's never changed. So here's your lizard, and nice keeping your hands to yourself with your lizard, or whatever you're going to say for your particular situation. But I catch myself doing the same thing with him. Don't touch your face, and the poor kid's like, like, oh, but it's a really difficult thing to do.
It is a difficult thing to do, and it sounds so simple when I say it, but it's so ingrained. Plus, sometimes when, it's part of what this is about is kind of catching them being good, catching them doing what you want them to do. And sometimes when and this is true for, I'm going to say all children, but it's not even children, for your friends, your spouse, who, anybody, when people are doing what we like or think, we often don't comment on it. It doesn't necessarily, sometimes it doesn't register, or maybe we just think in our head, but we don't verbalize it. But the minute they're doing something we don't want them to do, where it's much more ingrained in our society to say, oh, please don't do that, or don't. So what you want to do here is catch them being good. When they're doing what you want to give the attention there, and have, whatever item may be, of a good reinforcer. And it's like your example for the squishy toys, a lot of the students that I've worked with over the years, something tactile, something to hold on. And you know what, this is true even, a lot of my friends' children who do not have a diagnosis, they like spinners and playing with all that kind of stuff. And if you're comfortable with your student having those and holding them during high probability times of coming into contact with things you don't want them to touch, that's a perfect time to give them access to that. And if you can withhold it till that time and say, okay, we're only going to use this when we're in the community, so that it's still really interesting to you, and you're not like, oh, I just played with that for 2 hours this morning and now you want me to play with it again. That's another way to set yourself up for success. So, and
if I could just add, when you're first working on this, I know at least this has worked for me, is to do it frequently. So let's say you're walking down a long aisle, you might every 30 seconds, nice job with your hands in your pocket, nice job, playing with your toy, whatever it is, doing it frequently, so your child, the learner, we hope, thinks to themselves, wow, this is really working for me. Like, I'm getting praised for doing what, something I like. And then, I don't know, what's your comment on that, Megan?
Yeah, definitely. Especially early on, and also thinking about what the frequency, or how frequently does your child do that? Are they constantly reaching for things, or is it a one-off? But in a case like this, you're better to err on the side of reinforcing at a high rate, and especially when you're in the environment. And then again, like we said, you want to practice it at home as well. At home, maybe everything is sanitized and you're not concerned. Everything has free access to items, but you want to set up times where you're practicing just walking nicely past things, because the more practice, the more, sometimes what we say, more fluent, the more ingrained, the better you become at something, and it becomes a habit to then walk through and and play with what I have in my hand, as opposed to going over and touching something else. And that's what you're trying to go. You're trying to change, build a new habit that will replace or the other behaviors of touching your face and items. And I have to tell you, this entire time I have had a running commentary in the back of my head telling me not to touch my face, because I have single hair is right here. And I'm like, nope, don't touch your face.
This is so hard for everyone. I don't quote me on this, but I was watching the news and they talked about the frequency at which we all touch our faces. It's some insane amount every minute or every hour. We're constantly doing it. And this is a really hard thing to do. So this is why, we named this segment Reducing the Risk, or Limiting the Risk of Exposure from Cross-Contamination. Because it's something that's so ingrained in us, and in us all, to just have that knee-jerk reaction embedded in us to be touching our faces. So I certainly hope, Megan and I certainly hope that you have found this segment helpful. Again, please reach out to your school team. You may want to make this an IEP goal on your IEP, your individualized education program. But Megan, thank you so much. And once again, we hope that you found this information helpful.
Yes. Good luck. We're all
we're rooting for
doing
you.
the best we can here. Yes, and we're definitely rooting for you, and keep up the good work.
Okay. Thanks, Megan.
Thanks.